Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 68 of the Memorial Memo KSR's Kentucky Women's Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Phoenix Stevens. Can't even say my own name right. I am very excited to be on here. It's been a little while. I believe the last time we were on here, we were talking about Aisha Sifka and her commitment to Kentucky. Real quick, if you all were watching live during that, the very end kind of blacked out. Just showed a little too much film. YouTube didn't like that a whole lot, but if you want to go back and watch it, if you haven't, it's fixed. It's perfectly fine. But if you're just wondering why did the last 5 minutes or so of the stream cut out, that's what happened, but it's fixed and we're back on here today. This is a fun episode because right now for Kentucky basketball in general, it's a very interesting and fun time. Obviously, on the men's side, we're all kind of on Milan Momcilovic watch, right? Seeing, is he going to commit to Kentucky? What's going on? And then here on the women's side, we got some news. We've got just some fun happenings, just talking about the roster, and here in a second, like the WNBA, like that's fun. So I'm excited to get into it, and we will start with the Cats in the WNBA. Now, I want to start with our girl, Georgia Amore. We're going to go through all three of them that are still in the league, Georgia, Tiani, and, of course, Ron Howard. I want to start with Georgia because it's been really fun watching her play. I haven't enjoyed, just recently, they played the Seattle Storm. I think that may have been even last night. I don't understand. I mean, I get they're playing out in Seattle, but I feel like just a lot of the WNBA games in general are like 8:30 at night, 10 o'clock at night. I think I literally saw one day that was at 11 o'clock at night. And I just want to know, why? Why are we having games this late, But Georgia, I've been interested to see how she'll be this season, obviously coming back from a whole year off after the ACL tear. And maybe not super surprising, she's been on a minutes restriction coming back from an injury, but literally every single game she's playing more and more. Like if you go back to the preseason, she played 13 minutes, 17 minutes, and then she's averaged, 20, 21, 24, 24, 26, and 27 minutes per game over the course of the season. So her the load being put on her is slowly increasing, and we're starting to get some better performances out of her too. She's still trying to figure out, I think, scoring. She is a tremendous passer. That is very clear. But I think just finding her shot, she can do it every once in a while, and it produces a really good highlight for us on Twitter. But I think consistently she's still trying to find that. The efficiency hasn't been insanely horrible, especially consider when we're about to talk about Ron Howard, for example, who is very off and on. But she had a 13-point game against the Seattle Storm on the 24th, and then last night, 7 points, which is, all right, but I think she's doing a good job of really just kind of fitting in. The Mystics are actually a really fun team because they are, they're young, and I think they have, one, drafted really well in the last couple of years, but also I think just as a team, all the picks they've had really kind of come out well together. Reminds me in the NBA how the Oklahoma City Thunder have done it. They got all these draft picks through these trades, and then all of a sudden, they're going to win maybe back-to-back NBA championships. So, it's probably a good model to follow, right? Draft high, get really good players. Surprisingly, that works. It's like the Spurs doing that with Victor Wembanyama right now. But just as a whole, Georgia and the Mystics are playing pretty well, and it's exciting to watch our point guard shine in the W. Tiani Key, not quite as smooth a transition so far as Georgia's had. Really just kind of trying to figure her stuff out. She did hit a 3 against the Chicago Sky last night, so that was fun. She's, I think, trying to step out a little bit. She hit one against the Phoenix Mercury, I think, as well. And it's fun to see her kind of expand her game. She didn't shoot a ton last year at Kentucky, But, for being drafted 22nd, she's still trying to kind of, I would say work her way into the rotation. She's playing, in her last several games, 10 plus minutes. But I think, she needs to find her production on the court, but it is really fun getting to see her play, especially for the Toronto Tempo, a new expansion team. They got Marina Mabry up there as well. She's really fun to watch. And then for me, probably the player I enjoy watching the most in the WNBA, just because when I first really got into women's basketball, I was like, okay, I need a WNBA team. And this was before Kenny Brooks had put anyone in the NBA himself, or WNBA from Kentucky himself. So I picked the Atlanta Dream because Ron Howard's on the Atlanta Dream. And that's been a good choice. That's been a good investment for me so far. When I started following them a few years ago, they're like a 500 team, and then they win, I want to say like 9 games or something. And then this past year, they win 30 games, franchise record. They get bounced in the first round of the playoffs, unfortunately, but the future looks really bright, especially with players like Jordan Canada, Alicia Gray, and then I thought they've actually drafted pretty well. Tahina Pau from South Carolina, not Medina Okot. Who am I thinking of? She went to no, it was Medina, because Medina and Angel Reese are on the Dream now. I can't watch too many of their games because they're not all on television, but I try to follow as much as I can through social media and stuff. They're obviously having a pretty good season. They just lost to the Lynx, but Ron Howard's been balling. She actually was recently named the WNBA Eastern Conference Player of the Week after averaging like 23 points per game on 50-50-90 splits. So hard to really get mad at that. She, of course, didn't really have that great of a game against the Lynx, but again, Ron is, like the Dream are the best they have been since she's been there, right? She got drafted in 2022. They kind of stunk. Last year they were good, and this year they should be really good. So I'm hoping, just as a Dream fan, as a Ron Howard fan, UK women's basketball fan, all of those things, I hope they make a push for the WNBA title, because, my sports fandom recently has not been great. I have the New York Yankees going for me, right? So my sports fandom's really weird. I'm a UK fan, and this is what happens when there's no pro teams in Kentucky, so you kind of just pick whoever, right? So I'm a New York Yankees fan. They made the World Series in 24, and I was really excited for that. And then the Dodgers gave them the gentleman's sweep, which I was not a fan of. Last year they just didn't quite get back there. And then the Chicago Bulls are terrible. Atlanta Dream were terrible. They're better now. Tennessee Titans are awful, but I feel pretty good about the Titans coming up. In UK sports in general, still waiting on our basketball national title on both sides, right? I mean, I know the men have 8, but it's been, since 2012. So for the Dream, I just really hope they have the season I think they can have, because I want to enjoy winning sports. And Ron Howard, again, your WNBA Eastern Conference Player of the Week, and that's pretty exciting, to say the least. I'm really happy for her, and of course, like I said, as a fan of the Dream, I'm really happy, just personally. Now, to get more into the actual newsy stuff, I just really enjoy the W, man. I'm trying to, you try to get into it more. The accessibility and watchability of it isn't the greatest, unfortunately. But with more Kentucky players getting sent to the league, I want to watch as much as I can. And it's fun to follow, of course, my team, the Atlanta Dream, and then the Mystics with the UK players, the Toronto Tempo. It's just really fun. Now, literally right before we got on the podcast, I'd say maybe a couple hours ago, Charlotte McCurry, who is a guard at John Hardin School here in Kentucky, she announced that Kenny Brooks extended an offer to her. Now, she is a very, very good player. And, of course, you're saying, Phoenix, it's 2029. How do you know that? She was a freshman last year. Well, first of all, she ranked 4th in the state in scoring, right? Averaged 27.2 points per game. Excuse me, she was 5th in the state, not 4th. 10.8 rebounds per game. Shot 53.8% from the field, and that's on 10.2 attempts per game. And then 38.1% from beyond the arc. And, if you don't think a Kentucky offer is good enough, like, yeah, she's a really good player in the state, they're just offering her just to offer her. Well, she has offers from programs like Wisconsin, Texas A&M, Miami, Indiana, SMU, and I don't think has offers from these schools yet, but has visited Michigan, Louisville, North Carolina, some of your premier programs in the country. So I'm glad to see Kentucky get in on her. She actually, this past season, played against McLean County, which, if you all know, is where I'm from, and she scored 37, and we got blued out. So I didn't enjoy that performance as much, but just kind of watching her play here and there throughout the year, she was really fun to watch, in my opinion. Kentucky is very interesting because, it feels like for example, the 2025 class, you had Zakiya Johnson, Leah Macy, and Sierra Byers, who all ended up at premier programs. LSU for Zakiya, Notre Dame for Leah Macy, and then Sierra Byers went to Michigan, and I think she maybe transferred to like Cincinnati or something. I can't remember exactly. But they all, were highly ranked players, all in the top 100. I think they were all in like the top 60. Sarah Byers was a little bit lower than Zakiya and Leah Macy. And that was the 2025 class. And then you get like the 2026 class. There's not really anybody from the state. 27 and 28, there really aren't that elite of players either. But then 2029, you have Charlotte McCurry, and then you also have Jaden McLean from Ryle, who now, Jaden, I know we're talking about Charlotte, but Jaden I'm very excited for as well. She has been offered by Kentucky for a while now. She's taken a couple visits to UK, I know, some unofficial, I think one official maybe. Speaking of visits, Charlotte McCurry visited for the Oklahoma game this past season. And by the way, what a great game to go see, right? Top 5 win. What a thrilling game. Tiani Key, you didn't have her, so you kind of won in like this incredible way. Good game for her to go see, but Jaden McLean, 6'6" center, and she's the same age as Charlotte McCurry. And when you get someone who's that tall, that young, that's kind of fun and terrifying, right? Both of them are on ESPN's like Sports Center Next watch list, which is really Shane Laughlin. He's like ESPN's women's basketball high school recruiting guy. That's his way of saying, all right, here's the best players in 2029. It's a little too early for me to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, blah, blah, blah. But here are the best players. And it's a list, I think, of like 30 kids, and they're both on it. So we should have 2 kids from this state, Charlotte McCurry and Jaden McLean, in the 2029 class that should end up being 2 of the best players in the country. It's, it's very interesting to see, just again, like I said, 2025, you have 3 elite players, kind of nothing, and then 2029, 2 elite players, and Kentucky, I would imagine, has pretty good standing in the recruitment. Obviously, it's super, super early. She's a freshman in high school, but when you just consider, everything that Kentucky's doing on the recruiting trail, the in-state advantage, I would think Kentucky would be in a good spot for Charlotte McCurry and Jaden McLean. Their only other offer in the 2029 class that I know of is Caleb Morris, who is from North Carolina, goes to Crescent Christian Academy. Those are all 3 some top elite players. Now, speaking of top elite players, we'll skip back a year to the class of 2028 and talk about Sydney Douglas. Now, I personally did not get this information. This is courtesy of On3's Talia Goodman. Shout out TG. She, I didn't ask her, but I imagine she interviewed Sydney Douglas at one of the, the shoe circuits, right? I'm actually not sure if she's a, I don't know if this is a, I don't know if she's the Nike circuit or Adidas or whatever. I actually don't know. But I imagine Talia went, interviewed her, and got some scoop, talked about, who are her top schools, who's in contention for. Kentucky offered her a while back, I want to say pretty soon, right after Kenny got here. She's ranked in the top 5 and On3's rankings, or I guess it's actually Rivals rankings technically. So she's really good. And, I was curious because this has been a recruitment that people have kind of been waiting on for a while now, in terms of like, kind of like how we're doing with Jaden McClain and Charlotte McCurry. People have been looking at this recruitment years and years down the line. Some people think she could end up being, the next like Aja Wilson, right? So we'll see how that goes. But Sydney Douglas, back to Talia's article, talked about Kentucky. She talked about UCLA, Kentucky, California, Alabama, North Carolina, and Duke. According to Talia, I actually didn't see this myself, but I'm going to take her word for it. Also took an unofficial visit to UConn last year. So she talked about all of those programs. And to read what she said about Kentucky, she said, quote, "Kentucky's been really good too. They send me graphics all the time through my coach, and my mom always texts them good luck and stuff. I get on the phone with them pretty often, and I really like the head coach, how he develops his bigs and stuff. I'm also really close with the assistant coach, Sierra Gregory," which is interesting because I personally don't hear Sierra's name as much on the recruiting trail. I know, like, with obviously the connection to Charlotte was a really big piece in getting Deja Lawrence over here. I know she helps with recruiting with guards a lot, so it's kind of fun to see her do it with a 6'6" forward, center, whatever you want to call her. But sounds like she has some glowing remarks for Kentucky. UCLA is the home school, right? She's from LA, UCLA, obviously. But it's pretty early in this recruitment. I wasn't expecting anything soon, especially considering how many schools were mentioned. But I just think it's interesting, Kentucky's involved with UConn. We all know how great they are. UCLA, who just won the title. And then California, home state school. And then UNC Duke, who are pretty good women's basketball programs historically as well. And Alabama's an interesting one. But considering in her quote, they're talking about LA traffic and stuff. I'm going to assume Alabama's head coach maybe has some sort of connection to LA as well. So, yeah. Next is Nike EYBL. Now, if you don't know what in the world that is, that's one of the shoe circuits that all these kids go play on. Several Kentucky targets are playing in it. I actually went and looked at the Adidas side, the 3SSB or whatever. I don't really see any Kentucky kids on there. I know Jaden McClain actually plays on the Adidas circuit, but other than her, didn't really see any Kentucky targets. So we're just going to talk about the Nike circuit. Now, they just got through session 2 not that long ago. And I thought it was interesting because on the men's side, they, like session 2 was like the same time as session 2 on the girls' side as it was the men's side, right? And then the men immediately hopped into session 3, whereas I don't think session 3 on the girls' side is until July. So we'll have to kind of wait to see these Kentucky recruits keep playing. Just to kind of dive into that a little bit because, how good are these Kentucky recruits? How are they doing against some of the best competition in front of all these coaches and whatnot? So we'll start with Sydney Savory, who took a visit to Kentucky last year. This has been a kid that Kentucky has been on for a while, ranked number 5 overall on Rivals in the 2027 class. KSR actually spoke with her, I believe it was last year around her visit, and she was like, "Look, dude, Kentucky is all in on me. Like they are putting everything into this recruitment. I could imagine her being a really big part of the future at Kentucky." Well, she is the overall leading scorer on the Nike EYBL circuit, averaging 23.7 points per game and shooting 44% from beyond the arc. I know, at least at the time, and I know these two schools are still involved, Michigan, which again is her home state school, and UCLA again, those are two of the biggest bidders, two of the biggest pieces in the recruitment. And Kentucky, I think, is right there with them, especially considering just how hard they're recruiting her in general. Now, Michigan's a little interesting as well because not only are they the home state school and all that, I think she has a relative, maybe, her mom, can't remember who, actually works in the Michigan athletic department in some capacity. So I think that's an interesting point to add. But Sydney Savory killing it out on the recruiting trail in the Nike EYBL circuit. And then Jordan Palmer, 5-star 4 in the 2027 class, number 6 overall, just behind Sydney Savory. She has had some incredible games, actually. She's averaging 20.2 points per game, and she's shooting 57.3% from the field. I was kind of surprised. I'd only been able to see her play last year and not really much else. She hasn't really developed a massive or really, I would even say, like, impactful at all, really, three-point shot. And I think at her size, at 6 foot, like, I think if you're her, you probably want to be able to step out and shoot the three a little bit. I didn't totally see that. But then again, she's having, 30-point games out here, right? She had a 32-point, 19-rebound double-double in one game, and she's been doing really well. She actually played, if you remember the name Olivia Vukosa, played with her on Philly Rise last year. She was a Kentucky target, ended up committing to UConn. And then we go to the 2028 class, 4-star guard, Ariana Robinson, number 11 overall. She is the 7th leading scorer on the Nike EYBL circuit, averaging 17 points per game. And she has only played 3 games. I actually haven't seen her play in person myself. I didn't see her last year in Louisville. But she had, just some solid outings. You can tell with these 2028 kids, like you can really see the class differentiation. Like the 2027 kids just look a lot more polished, a lot more well-rounded. You can see the 2028 kids are still kind of figuring that out. Morgan Reckley, point guard in the 2028 class, number 17 overall, 4-star guard. She, she's a good passer to a degree, but also, she's averaging 5.6 assists per game, and she can score the ball pretty well. But she's also turning the ball over like 7 times a game. So it's interesting to kind of see how that 2028 class is still like trying to come along. And granted, they're playing against literally like the best of the best, even 2027 kids, so playing a grade up, for them, it's just interesting because Kenny Brooks and the staff are going after some of the best players, right, in high school basketball. And we're talking about how great the 2029 kids are from Kentucky, and even then, like, some of the 2028 kids still don't look super polished, right? Still don't look super great. So that's why I say, like, with Charlotte McCurry and Jaden McClain, they'll be really good down the road. They're developing that, and you can see the potential. But the 2027 kids that Kentucky is on, they all look pretty good, especially someone like Sydney Savory, in my opinion. Now, a quick shout to today's sponsor, Rollback. You listening can change the game with Rollback, a proud partner of KSR. You got the best fit and the best feel with their incredibly comfortable activewear, from polos and quarter zips to shorts and Delta Performance pants. You will look good and feel good with Rollback. Use promo code KSR for 20% off your first purchase at rollback.com. Now, we're already like 25 minutes in roughly, but the meat and potatoes, or at least what I would hope is the meat and potatoes of this episode, I want to talk about how good do I really think Kentucky is. With the roster they have, and we'll talk about it in a second, the roster they could have if they add someone else. I don't know if we've really done a massive deep dive into it, but this Kentucky team, some people have asked me, like, even nationally, Phoenix, what do you make of this team? And first of all, the thing I like to say to them is, well, every time I think Kenny's done with the roster, he's not done, right? I thought they were done. They got Measy O'Neal. I thought they were done after getting Shaq's daughter. They go get Aisha Sifka, a former top 10 draft pick. I thought they were done with Aisha Sifka, and we'll talk about it in a minute. I think there's a chance they add somebody else now. So, that's my first thing I like to say. But you look at the pieces on Kentucky's roster now. Okay, I think you can pretty fairly say, like, Clara Strack is going to be your best player. But at the same time, in a new system, could someone like Maisie O'Neal rival her for that? Right? Could Asia Boone really take another step up and do that? It's just interesting to see, like, can Kentucky, develop some of these already really, really good players and turn them into, bigger stars. I like Clara Strack at Virginia Tech hadn't quite had that chance, and she's a different story. But I feel like when she got to Kentucky, she became a star and still somehow got better even this past year, right? Like, her first year at Kentucky was really good, and then she got even better. I'm curious, can Kentucky do that with Maisie O'Neal, Asia Boone, maybe even like an Aisha Sifka? Can she just develop into just like a really, really great player? I think that'll be fun to see. For me, there are some questions I'm kind of curious about. Like, who, on paper, you look at the roster, and I think you could say, well, Phoenix, there's a lot of really, really good shooters on this team. But unless we're going to go win the national title, I kind of doubt all of those players. And unless we just shoot 53s a game, I doubt all of those players are going to hit their percentages at the volume they've been shooting at, right? So I kind of just wonder, like, what is Kentucky going to do in terms of a rotation? I think that's a pretty big question to have. Kentucky has, 11 players, 10, 11 players now that could all play, but is Kenny Brooks willing to expand his rotation? We've seen, at Kentucky, he's had limited benches, and we've been able to give him that kind of, like, excuse, that pass of, all right, well, some of these players on the end of the bench just aren't quite as good as your starters. And I'm not saying you need a team full of, 12 capable starters, but can you have some players that can play more than 5-10 minutes per game, right? For example, Deanna Collins, who is a great shooter on paper, looks good, has had some SEC experience even. Are you going to be able to get her into the rotation enough to where you can really feel her impact? I personally think Kentucky can do that. It's just a matter of Kenny's willing to do it. Ayanna Patterson is someone who is really interesting because her stats at UConn weren't great, but she was a former top 5 recruit. And I've said it before, just kind of has this really similar, I kind of think, like, potential career arc of a Tiani Key, who was the number 9 overall recruit, didn't quite get things rolling in North Carolina, comes in and is a tremendous player, and is now a WNBA player, right, for the Toronto Tempo. Like, can Ayanna Patterson, again, who will have 2 years here at Kentucky, like Tiani did, can she have that similar career arc, right? Because at that point, it gets hard to say, hey, Yana, you're not starting, right? Because right now, if you ask me, I think the starting lineup is Madden Greenway, Asia Boone, Aisha Sivka, Maisie O'Neal, and Clara Strack. Okay, there's your 5. Okay, so now it gets hard for me to say, Deanna Collins, you shoot 40% from 3, 10 points per game. You can't start, right? Ayanna Patterson, who we just talked about for all those reasons. Oh, you can't start either. And then you start to look down the bench and, now you got to squeeze in minutes for someone like Dom Perova, who, hasn't played in 2 years, but shoots 40% from 3, and, if she's open, she can let it fly and make it. I haven't even mentioned, Emily McDonald, Savvy Swords, 2 elite freshmen who can shoot and play really well. So I just think Kenny has a lot of options, and I'm just curious to see where he goes. Like, if he narrows the rotation again, like, what are the consequences of that? I think we'd all still love to see a true backup center, right? Kentucky had Elsa Vadifers last year, but she didn't play. And be quite frank with you, Kentucky, I think, got lucky with Clara Strack staying healthy, and I think they'll kind of need some of that luck again unless they go add a center that can actually play, right? You saw Tiani Key go down with injury, And yeah, she's not your center, but you lost her, and you didn't I don't think you fell apart, but you were hanging on by a thread, and you lost some games you shouldn't have. And, when you could have been hosting, you weren't, right? Instead of maybe being a 3 seed and avoiding Texas in the Sweet 16, you had to play that game. So, I just look at this team and just wonder a lot of things. Like, what can we expect out of year one Madden Greenway? Is she, I tend to think that with Madden, she's going to have a lot of pieces around her, right, that I just talked about with this whole demonstration. I don't really worry about Madden. She's already super talented, ranked number 9 in the Rivals rankings, 5-star recruit. But, I just wonder, for one, what's her scoring going to be like, right? Because I don't really see too big of an issue with her passing the ball to her teammates who are going to knock down the 3, to Measy and Clara Strack down low, right? I'm not too concerned about that. Her playmaking, I'm not really that worried about that. But in high school, she is an elite scorer, averaged 30 points per game, and broke the Minnesota state record for points scored, So what I'm curious to see is, can she score at a high level as a freshman? Can she do that in the SEC, right? I think a junior, senior year Madden Greenway, yeah, that's probably not a question. I'm sure she'll be able to score in bunches. But, I think of the 3 freshmen, Madden is probably the one everybody is most curious, most excited to see, because she's the highest ranked, because she's a point guard, because of all the crazy stuff we see, how she's like a 15-sport athlete and is the greatest ever at all those sports. The future of Kentucky women's basketball under her should be really exciting. And you think about how Kenny, Tony Morgan was really good. Georgia Amore is really good, but they weren't as talented as her coming out of high school, right? So, what's Kenny Brooks' development with point guards going to be like with a top 10 player? I think that should be really fun to see. And then with the other freshman, Emily McDonald, won the Sprite Jam Fest 3-point contest, and Savvy Swords puts up crazy stat lines every time I see her play. So, how do you fit those players in? It's not a problem, right? If it is, it's a good problem to have. But it really feels like for the first time at Kentucky, Kenny has options, he has depth, and you hadn't really seen that in the first 2 years. But it feels like with the mixing and matching and, different lineups, different personnel groups even, Kenny, he really has this almost endless bag of, players he can go to. And I look around the SEC, I don't really think there's too many other programs like that. Okay? LSU is going to be very good. Oklahoma is going to be very good. Texas, I'm actually really intrigued to watch because they lost a lot of talent from this past year. Back-to-back, elite championship contending teams, they come up just short. And, thank God for them, I guess. They retain Madison Booker, but they lose everyone else to the portal, all of their other big-time contributors. Now, to be fair, they have the best or second-best freshman class coming in. But it's going to be interesting to see a team like Texas, who was ranked in the top 3, top 5 all year. Is Texas going to be a top 15 team this year? Are they going to be top 10, top 20? What do they look like? Everyone I talk to seems to think that South Carolina is going to be the best team in the SEC next year. Wow, imagine that. Never heard that one before. But I think with the freshman class they've brought in and some of the returners they have, and even someone like Alicia Tornabees, who Kentucky recruited, is kind of towards the end of the bench at South Carolina. Oh, she's a really great player. I even saw one South Carolina person say they thought it could be Dawn Staley's best team she's had there, so that's terrifying. But, seriously, other than South Carolina, I could really see a world where Kentucky's the second best team in the SEC. And in that case, where you're the second best team in the league, will you win the regular season? Probably not. But if you make it to Sunday in the SEC tournament and you are playing South Carolina, at that point, it's a one-game scenario and you could win an SEC tournament championship. But I truly think this team, when you think about the NCAA tournament, do they have one seed potential? I don't know. I think they would need to make it to Sunday in the SEC tournament if you really wanted to see that. But I was talking to somebody not that long ago, and I've said this on the message board as well. I feel like I would be disappointed if Kentucky didn't make it back to the Sweet 16, and if they didn't make it to an Elite 8 maybe. At that point it depends what seed you are, if you play a 1 seed in the Sweet 16 again. But, I think the expectation for this group, it's like I said, I know I've said it on here before, I thought going to this year, and this is before all the additions, before some of the recruits and stuff, I kind of just figured this year would be a little bit of a step back because you knew Amelia Hassett, Tony Morgan, Tiani Key, and Jordan Obi were going to the WNBA. You knew you were losing those pieces. And yeah, you had senior Clara Strack and senior Asia Boone. But what else was there what else was there? And, you have the free freshmen, but they're not surefire things. I just thought they'll regress a little bit. Not be terrible. They'll make the tournament. They'll be, a Sweet 16 potential team, but they won't, I thought from year 1 to year 2, they took a step up. And I didn't think they're going to quite take that step from year 2 to year 3. Maybe be lateral, maybe slide just a little bit. I truly think this is Kenny's best team he's had at Kentucky, which is really fun to say because he just made the Sweet 16 here for the first time in a decade. I was talking to somebody, and they're like, look, when we go to do as some national guy who I was talking to, they do preseason NCAA tournament picks, And he was like, look, man, when I do my preseason Final Four, Kentucky's going to be in it, right? And I think if you're Kentucky, a Final Four is a massive success because you've never been there. But it truly feels like just this team, if the pieces align, if the stars align, I think Madden Greenway's got to hit her potential. Aisha Sifka's got to hit her potential. Players can't really regress at all. But if Kentucky can just be what they can be, what is Kentucky's ceiling at the end of the day? From my conversations with people, it kind of sounds like, hey, they can make a push for an SEC championship. They can make a push for a Final Four. They can. Will they? Will they do those things? Don't know yet. It's probably a little too early to say still. But, just looking at the rest of the SEC, I can't say this year the SEC got ridiculously better, I think. I think the SEC actually won't be quite as good. Now, just thinking nationally, Southern California, they should be a lot better. In fact, they should be one of the best teams in the country, if not the best. UCLA will still be very, very good. We already talked about South Carolina. UConn should still be pretty good, obviously. Your elite program should still be elite. Vandy's going to be a team that's going to, we forget about Vandy, but they could very well compete with South Carolina, Kentucky, LSU, all those teams, Oklahoma, to win the SEC. Vandy should be very, very good, maybe even be a 1 seed. So it'll be fun to see. But, again, just when I talk to people are like, hey, Kentucky, they can do stuff they've never done before. And that's obviously pretty exciting. Now, the other question that I'm asking, is Kenny Brooks still cooking? Phoenix, is the roster even done at this point? Easiest way for me to put it is I don't think so. I talked to some people. So I got a text, I think it was yesterday. I got a text that kind of made me think, oh crap, Kentucky might actually add somebody. This is cool. I do not have a name. I don't know who Kentucky's after. I really don't. I wish I did. I wish I could provide that for you all. But I don't know who Kentucky's going after. I just heard, hey, they could be adding someone else. And so I was like, that's interesting. And so I send out some feelers to some sources, and they're kind of they're kind of quick to remind me, like, hey, Phoenix, Kenny never stops recruiting. Like, this dude's a maniac. He doesn't stop recruiting. But when sending out those feelers and just kind of seeing what everybody else thought, there was this notion of, again, and it's kind of like I talked about of how good Kentucky is, they really think they can make a push here with this team. And I think, I think Kentucky could be adding someone pretty good. I don't know that for a fact. I'm just saying. But just based on what I've talked to people and heard, like Kenny and this staff, I think they feel very, very confident that they can make a push here. And I think it's interesting because before this whole transfer portal season, before any of the additions, I don't know if they felt like that. Kenny was considering Virginia and almost left. Didn't feel like that was the right opportunity. And now that he's back, I feel like, maybe the investment's gone up, maybe some things like that. And Kentucky is seriously thinking, Kenny's seriously thinking, hey, if we're going to go win an SEC championship, let's do it now. And I don't know if that means this year, but, with Madden Greenway being a freshman, I'll just use her as a timetable. I think they seriously think, oh, hey, we can do this, before she graduates. I seriously think Kentucky thinks we can be among the best teams in the country now or very, very soon. And I just thought it was interesting because, it's like I said earlier, every time I think the roster's done, just kidding, it's not. And yesterday I got a text saying, hey, might not be done. I'm curious to see who they could go get. Now, I kind of tried to look into it a little bit. I couldn't really get a name, like I said. But I personally, and no one said this to me directly, but I personally get the feeling it's an international kid. It's an overseas kid. And I think they would have to be careful with doing that, considering the NCAA's new eligibility rule about international kids, right? The rule's basically like, hey, if you play in a pro league, you're not eligible. Like, if you play in a overseas pro league, you're not eligible anymore in the NCAA. Which I'll actually say, I did talk to some people that seem to think that Aisha Sifka is good to go, right? I'm not going to pretend to know how. I don't know if that doesn't go into effect for this season. I don't know the specifics all the way. But if you ask me, she played in like 3 pro leagues overseas. I feel like she fits the purpose of that bill pretty well. But I'm not going to complain. I'm glad to have her. And same thing with Usman on the men's side as well. I kind of asked about him, and it kind of seems like it's a consensus thing there. So glad to have her. I hope. We still don't know what class she is. Well, I guess technically we don't know for sure if she's eligible. I just heard that she should be, but we don't know if she'll be a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, anything like that. I did talk to one person. They kind of thought it would be freshman, sophomore, or junior, probably leaning sophomore. So that'll be interesting to see. We won't know about that for at least a little bit, I think. But I think, just based on what I heard again, I think Aisha Sifka should be eligible. But, I just, Kenny's a monster recruiter, right? And he's relentless with this stuff. I actually heard that, I think it's early June, like next week maybe, like he might be taking like a little vacation, right? Like he might be like relaxing a little bit. I don't think next week's a dead period. I know we just had one. But, I would say, Kenny, you deserve that vacation, brother. Like, go relax, like, enjoy yourself. So, I just thought that was funny to kind of add to it because this man has been recruiting nonstop. And like I said, every time this Kentucky roster seems complete, just kidding, let's add somebody else into the mix. I'm really excited to kind of see who it could be if it happens. I don't want to speak on it like Kentucky's certainly adding someone else. That's a if it happens. But, I just don't think they're quite content or done with trying to add someone else to the roster. And hopefully, I think it's an overseas person or kid. I hope it's a big to kind of help the front court depth, but we'll see. Kind of excited either way. This is a newer thing. I know not all of you all watch live, and I get it. You have schedules. Not everybody's free at Thursday. at 6 o'clock at night. I understand that. So I want to say, if you are not watching live or listening live, if you're listening on podcast, go to the YouTube channel. If you're on YouTube, go to the comment section. Okay, leave a comment, leave a question if you want. If you just want to say Phoenix, you suck, say it. If you want to ask a genuine question, ask it. I'm gonna try to do this with every episode. If you comment and leave us a comment or question about Kentucky women's basketball or whatever, really, doesn't have to be Kentucky women's basketball, but considering that is the theme of the show, that would probably be your question. I will try to read it on next week's episode. So, for example, if you comment right now, hey, Phoenix, here's my question, here's my comment, I will read it, talk about it, answer your question on next week's episode, because I know, for one, not everybody can afford to be on KS Board. I understand that, I would always encourage you all to be over there, but listen, I get money can be tight. Not everybody can fork up the, $11 a month or whatever it is. So I understand that, but I also understand if you can't watch live, you would still like to be, still like to ask something, still like to comment something. This is your chance to. So we'll get doing that right now. We'll start with Randall Smith, who last week, or I guess 2 weeks ago, because it's been a minute since we did an episode of this, asked, hey, point guard, what are the options and what's the best bet to start? Brooks is doing a good job. He said he saw the potential to build here, and he is on that path. I certainly agree with your second point about how he is on that path to building something special here. I think it was after that Sweet 16 game, he talked about, kind of awakening that sleeping giant a little bit, and I think he's done a really good job of that, at least thus far. Now, to answer your question, what's the best bet to start a point guard? I personally think that's Madden Greenway. Everyone I talk to seems to think that. I think the staff is pretty confident in the fact that, she can handle being a starting point guard with the pieces around her. I think when they recruited her, they sold her on the fact that, hey, you are the future of Kentucky women's basketball. This program will be on your shoulders a little bit. And I think she's going to take that well. I think Madden Greenway will be your starting point guard and take up most of the minutes there. I think Asia Boone, maybe even Deanna Collins a little bit, can split backup point guard duties. But as far as the starter, I personally think Madden Greenway is the surefire answer there. Got B. Adams 614 says, we've never seen this caliber of talent. And with as good as they were this year, they are even more talented for next season. Can't wait to watch them play. You can guarantee season tickets will sell out again. Yeah, season tickets have been flying, right? I actually don't know when they go on sale. I can ask about that if you all want. But I know the past 2 years they have flown by. People, it's a hot commodity to get those tickets. And I think a big part of it, again, is just the product that Kenny Brooks is building at Kentucky, when we see him his first year, it's this new thing, kind of like it'll be for Will Stein in football, which, by the way, it's about hot commodities. That Alabama ticket in week 2, sheesh, that's going to be something. But, the first year, it's new, he's a great coach, it should be fun. And then the second year, it's this proven product. And the third year, I think it's like you said, we've never seen this caliber of talent. I certainly have not, and I haven't been following it as long as some of you potentially, right? But we have not seen this level of stardom and talent in Lexington on the women's basketball side in a very long time, at least, and maybe ever. So, like you said, we have never seen this caliber of talent, and they should be very, very talented, even more talented for next season. And it should be a really fun year to watch. And then Jay the Great says, love what Brooks has put together. Just hope the 3 freshmen all get significant playing time. They could be the foundation of a really good next 4 years, in my opinion. And like I said with Madden, I really do think she'll be the starting point guard. I do think she is the future of Kentucky women's basketball. I don't think you have anything to worry about there with her. Now, the other two, it's like I kind of talked about earlier, I'm also interested to see what Kentucky does there with those two. Like I said, Emily McDonald, ESPN's Shane Laughlin was like, she's the fastest riser in the 2026 class. Tremendous shooter, maybe the best shooter in the class. And those are things that make you think, hey, she can play. I think what's going to be interesting for her, and I actually don't have the greatest read on this yet, is how can she defend? Kind of the same questions we had to ask about Kaylin Carroll. How can she defend? And I think we have to ask those same questions for Savvy Swords as well. I feel like Savvy's game, for the most part, is maybe a little bit more well-rounded than Emily's. I think Emily's probably the better shooter there, but Savvy probably has the more well-rounded game. But considering how high-profile both of those kids are, like, I'm pretty sure in Rivals rankings, Madden Greenway is ranked number 9, Savvy Swords is ranked number 10, and then Emily McDonald's a top 40 recruit. But like I said, one of the fastest risers, biggest risers in the class, and as ESPN Shane Laughlin said, maybe the best shooter in the class. So I'm really excited to watch all three of them play. I don't think we have to kind of sit here and worry or question about how much Madden will play, unless Kenny just throws us a curveball and starts, I don't know, Asia Boone or Deanna Collins at point guard, or goes and gets someone else overall. I'm going to actually take the comment off the screen for a moment, because we have a comment from Michael Taylor here live asking where did the class rank overall. So ESPN came out and said Kentucky had the 6th overall 2026 recruiting class. I want to say USC was number 1. They got the number 1 player, Sanaya Hall, and the number 1 international prospect in Satya Fagan. And some other kids, I'm pretty sure. So I think USC was number 1. And then I want to say Texas, South Carolina were up there. I know Texas was. I think South Carolina was too. Duke, Notre Dame. How many schools I just named? I think that could be the 5 ahead of Kentucky. So, but yeah, I know Kentucky was ranked number 6 overall by ESPN. This transfer portal class was ranked number 6 by On3 by Talia Goodman. So Kentucky has put together, and that didn't include Aisha Sivka either. So I actually tweeted this when those rankings came out. This offseason, and of course starting with Madden Greenway a couple of years ago, really, Kenny Brooks has put together a top 6 high school recruiting class, a top 6 transfer portal class, and with Aisha Sivka brought in a former top 10 WNBA draft pick, which is just crazy. So it's really remarkable to see how she is done. I was thinking about the freshmen themselves. How Kenny is done on the recruiting trail. Jim Henson live asking, with McDonald and Swords, do you think either have that dog like Aubrey Galvin of Vandy? Man, let me say this about Aubrey Galvin. I love watching her play, but why does she have to be so damn good against Kentucky? She, and a lot of people love to tell me this because I cover Kentucky, she's the next Georgia Amore, man. I mean, she's not Australian, but damn it, she's like 4'5". 4'5". I can't speak today. She's like 5'4", 5'6", something like that, and just kind of plays a lot like her. And people are like, that's Georgia Amore coming up again. And she's really, really good. So with McDonald's and Swords, do I think they'll have the dog like Aubrey Galvin? Firstly, I'll say I hope so, right? I hope everybody's got that dog in them. But I think Savvy has a little bit of that in her. I'm not saying Emily doesn't. I just haven't quite seen it. I haven't been able to watch too much of them playing just yet, admittedly. But the little I have seen from Savvy, and I see it from Madden too even, like, they'll go out there and they'll get after it, right? Madden was out here like drawing charges in the McDonald's All-American game like a psychopath. Michael Taylor says 4'5". Dang, I can't speak, man. I'm not diagnosed with any sort of speech impediment or anything, and I don't want to joke about that because that could be offensive to people, obviously. But yeah, I can't speak half the time, and I probably just speak too fast. But back to Jim Henson's comment, with Madden, like, she was drawing charges in the McDonald's All-American game. What? Like, this is a high school all-star game, and you're playing it like it's the Minnesota State Championship, right? So I think she's got some dog in her. Savvy, I've just seen her, like, her competitive fire out on the court at times. So I think she's got some dog. Again, I'm not going to say Emily doesn't have it. I don't know. She very well could. I just haven't seen it yet. But I feel like with at least two of the three, you can for sure say they've got some dog in them. And hopefully, as freshmen, they end up being about as good as Aubrey Galvin was as a freshman. Vandy is low-key terrifying because, I don't remember them making any, like, ridiculously big splashes in the portal. I think maybe they had one that I'm not thinking of. But they still have Michaela Blakes. They still have Aubrey Galvin. And they were fantastic last year and should be really good again this year. Of course, I kind of hope that's not necessarily the case. So, I want to thank you all for tuning in. It's been a fun one, and I tried to squeeze in as much as I could. And I don't know if we'll make this a theme throughout the summer of, during the season, this is obviously a weekly podcast. I don't know if we'll space it out this much all summer long or not, but I'm glad we did it this time because, it made for a much bigger, kind of more fulfilling episode. I don't want to get on here and be talking for 20 minutes and then we're out. I want to give you all an actual podcast, right? And I'm glad you all tuned in. Thank you all for your comments. Thank you, Michael Taylor, for following along with my, as you say, great coverage. I appreciate you following along. I appreciate all of you all. Even Michael, if I am out here saying 4'5", I can't speak right. It means a lot to me that you all tune in week in and week out. I didn't realize this until our 50th episode when I interviewed Bria Goss and was doing some research. Shout out to Stephen Peak for helping me with it. You all have made this one of the biggest, and this is so crazy to say because it's Kentucky. It's not like it's UConn, right? One of the biggest team-specific women's college basketball podcasts in the country. Right? We get great numbers, and listen, I'd like to think I'm the reason for a lot of that, but it's totally up to you all. So thank you. Like, comment, subscribe, and do all those wonderful things. We just hit 60,000 subscribers. Let's make that push to 70, 65K, 70K, and so on. Please like and subscribe. And like I said, with the questions, leave us a comment, leave us a question if you're not watching live. If you want to chime in on next episode, if you want to talk some Kentucky women's basketball, feel free to chime in. So do those wonderful things for us. Again, thank you all so much for tuning in. This has been episode 68 of the Memorial Memo. As an immature 22-year-old, we may do something extra fun for episode 69. We'll figure that out. But until next time, thank you all so much for tuning in, and go Cats.